go over the math materials a bit to give you an idea of what we're going to be doing going forward. When we meet next Monday for the first time, we'll go over some basics, and then we're actually just going to really dive in to practicing with assessments. I'm going to have you do some other validity stuff over the weekend, but we need to get some practice and hands-on experience with making goals and making assessments and things like that. So I wanted you to look at the math materials, and I kind of walked you through it already. We looked at lesson 1 here, dividing with remainders. Have a vocabulary term there. We talked about the main idea that, yeah, they're dividing already, but now we're throwing in this idea that things don't always work out evenly, right? We noticed that there were different formats. We noticed that there were word problems, right? And so on. And so the great thing about math is that it gives you an idea of the types of questions that you will be asking and really the goals you want to hit with your students. What I wanted you to do then was to look at lessons 2 and 3 and think about what were the main ideas for those particular goals. For lesson 1, the way that I had it here, right, students will be able to determine the remainder in a division problem with single-digit quotients. We are going to have this as a goal going forward. Students will be able to use counters to represent division problems, and then students will be able to solve numeric division problems with the remainders without using counters. Of course, these are single-digit quotients. The thing that I want to sketch out here too are the assessments and how many items I want to use for each particular goal. And the key thing here is the alignment between the goals that I have and the assessments that I create. If I have a goal, I should have some items assessing that goal. Otherwise, I don't really know whether or not my students can do what I want them to do, or if they actually learned what I taught them. So for goal number 1, this idea of using counters to represent division problems, it's just a way of saying they need to have a visual representation of a math problem with a remainder. I'm going to use 3, 2 with remainders, 1 without, just to make sure that they don't think now that everything needs a remainder. Good to put a couple of those checks in there. And then I have students will be able to solve numeric division problems with the remainders without using counters. And number sentences, your basic, 4 divided by 3 kind of thing. And then word problems. So I'm going to have 5 division problems for this first one with remainders in a horizontal format and 5 in a vertical format. So if I'm looking at this, right, this is my horizontal. This is what I mean by the vertical one. I didn't know how else to describe it, but you get the idea. I could put it in fraction form too. Then I would also have 3 word problems to assess goal 2.2 with remainders, 1 without remainders, because word problems take longer and because I'm measuring, remember, reading ability as well. I want to keep things simple and I want to limit the number of those. I think 3 will make me feel confident as to whether or not they can actually do this. No, this is just if I'm assessing level 1. If I'm going to assess the whole unit, I would have to take these numbers down a lot because otherwise fatigue will sit in and we'll talk about all the problems with that. So when I look at lesson 2 then, the questions I want you to get in the habit of asking yourself is how do I get to lesson 2 from lesson 1? How does it build on lesson 1 and what is new? Well, if I look at lesson 2 right now, I'm using base 10 blocks. And the big thing that you'll notice is that now I'm dividing, right, the tens column first. And if you look at the problems here right now, I have these double-digit quotients. 1 value is in the tens columns, 1 is in the ones column, and it gets at this idea of regrouping. Now, they've done regrouping before, they've done division before, they've probably used base 10 blocks before. Now they're just making sure that it sticks with the whole remainder idea. Right here, they can make a model, same idea, right? There's other questions here. This is a little different. It has a thing about telling time, a little bit different here, right? This is mixed review and test prep, so they're talking about all the different units that they've been teaching so far. So we're not going to focus a lot on that, but we are going to focus on this. Notice it's pretty short. So my goals for this lesson, right, or the major skills they're developing here is that dividing the tens and regrouping, making sure that, something happened there, making sure that they are able to identify the remainder. my lesson 2 goals then, that I want them to be able to solve basic division problems with two-place quotients and remainders. And first goal is they can use or visually represent things with base 10 blocks. And then the second goal is they will be able to recall the procedure to divide tens and then ones using regrouping. I want them to do it with number sentences and word problems. My format's going to be the same as lesson 1, same mix, right? 3 visual representation problems. Then I have my 5 division problems in a horizontal, 5 in a vertical format, and 3 word problems. All again using double-digit quotients, making sure they have to divide the tens column. So that's what I want you to think about going forward, right? How many times do they need to demonstrate a skill for me to feel or for you to feel confident that you have a good handle on whether they can do it or not? Remember again that because this is math, and because math really boils down to a lot of memorization of facts, when I divide things by 3, it's a lot harder than when I divide things by 2 or by 1. And students will have different levels of mastery, so I will need enough problems so I can get a mix of divisors in there. Word problems as well, I want to remember to keep my sentences short, not have a lot of extra information in there unless I'm really trying to make it more challenging, and keep the reading level below the level of the students who are taking it. I don't want to challenge anybody in their ability to read the problem. I just want them to be able to identify the right information. So that leads us to lesson 3. In lesson 3, we get a little more kind of classic, right? In the whole sense that we have our basic long division, right? Makes sense, ... and then there's this way to check things. The key thing here is that students need to remember that they multiply then add, right? Rather than add then multiply, they won't get the right answer, and when they check, they won't know. Now, if I'm looking at this, right, I have a whole bunch of problems, and they are kind of mixing up what's missing between the remainder and the quotient here. Here, they are showing you that multiplication and division complement each other. And then I have my word problems again, but I also have a graph. And if I look throughout this thing, I have some more graphs here. I have a table here, another table here, and I have another graph down here. So there's a lot of graphic interpretation or graphic literacy, data literacy, that is also kind of creeping its way in here. So when I look at this, right, the new thing here, it builds off of the last 2 units, or the last 2 lessons. By first, it's basic with counters, lots of scaffolding. Second, base 10 blocks, working with those double-digit quotients. Now it's just, hey, without a visual thing, these are the mechanics of how you go through it. If I look at this then, right, lesson 3, how it's built, describe it here. It extends the concepts and strategies. What are the major skills? The key here is the long division process with remainders and how to check answers. So my goals then amount to these things right here. Students will be able to apply long division to solve graphically represented division problems with 2-place quotients. That's the ultimate overall goal. That breaks down into they will be able to recall the steps in long division. They will be able to use multiplication to check their answers in long division problems, right? And then students will be able to interpret graphs to solve division word problems with remainders. And that breaks down into 2 more skills: interpreting graphic information and solving word problems. So if I go down to my lesson assessment, right, goal 1I will be assessed by having students show their work in 6 problems. I'm not going to have them list out or write out the steps. That seems like a waste of time. I'll know if they can do it, Right, so I have 6 problems where they show their work, division. Those same, goal number 2, will be assessed using those same 6 problems where they also have to show their work in checking their answers. Now again, I expect some students to get some of these wrong, not because they don't get the process of long division and checking your answers, but because they have mistakes in their math facts. So I have to be careful about what I'm assessing here. I don't want to mislead myself by thinking students aren't getting long division because they don't know their math facts. If they get the process, they get the process. That's where I'm really looking at the work. Now I have an additional 6 questions that won't require them to show their work to help me understand the math fact side of things. Now they can if they want, and that'll give me some more insight, but I don't want to waste their time. I'm sure you all knew, or maybe you were one of the people who hated showing your work because you're like, this is easy, I know the answers. Why am I wasting my time, right? So 6, that it's optional. If students are struggling or they're not sure, they can show their work. It'll help them gain their confidence, and it will let you, the teacher, know if they're making a common mistake. Goal number 3 will be assessed by one graph that has 3 questions about it. And if you look at the materials that they were looking at, right, they give one graph and then they have a couple questions about it. That would be the same thing that I'm doing. In this case, because this is a bar graph and I'm assuming that I would be talking about bar graphs, I would keep it a bar graph. I wouldn't use bar graphs in class over and over and then give them a pie graph. That's just setting myself up for failure and setting them up for failure. So make sure that you keep things in alignment, not just with the general idea, but with the specific content. Now, if I'm trying to teach them to read a bunch of different graphs, I might do something different. I'd have to show them a bar graph on day 1, a pie graph on day 2, a line graph on day 3, and so on. And then I can give them whatever I want. But I don't, again, want to test them on something that I haven't taught them at this point. But that's it. Now, these are the goals. For Wednesday then, or on Wednesday, I should say, I will be doing the same thing with lessons 4 and 5, which are a little different. The progression is really clear between lessons 1 and 3, but when you get to 4, it's a little harder to make sense of, and when you get to 5, it's also hard to make sense of. So we'll talk about how we might approach those. But that is it. When we meet next Monday, we will be trying to put these assessments together. And I'll put you in groups, and each group will have their own goal to do. We'll decide on how many items for a unit assessment we would want. We'll piece it together, and then we'll talk about it, throw it up on the board, and assemble the whole thing. Everyone can get a copy. All right, that's it. Stay warm.